What is a Vermont Republican? Governor Phil Scott and the VT GOP establishment are modern heirs of the Rockefeller Republicans, and they argue that only liberal Republicans can succeed in Vermont. In contrast, members of a growing grassroots movement believe that the right will only have a future when they show Vermonters that they stand for policies and positions that are distinct from the left. Zachary Zupan of Manchester and Jamison Dunne of Heartland join us to discuss. Welcome. So, to my introduction, the GOP establishment, lightheartedly known as the Scott Troopers, would say that, Meg, you're insisting on ideological purity. We need to practice big tent politics, and we need to create room for everyone. What would you say to that?
Well, I would take issue with the idea that we aren't a big tent party already.
Okay.
You know, I don't think that a big tent party is defined by throwing open its doors to any sort of ideology that that the members want to perpetuate. I think that a big tent party is one that is founded on the central precepts of the American Constitution, of a right to life, of a right to liberty, and the pursuit of happiness and property, and how adhering to those values and standing up for those rights is in the best interests of everyone across the socioeconomic spectrum.
So speaking of ideological purity, in Vermont we have the Progressive Party, a third party which has been very successfully moving the state further and further to the left, and I'd like to add, to the chagrin of many Democrats, Bernie Sanders is celebrated across the nation for his ideological purity. So then why is Vermont's right expected to be wishy-washy at best when it comes to principles?
I think, with the Progressive Party in Vermont and Bernie Sanders nationally, we're seeing the growing of a division within their group. There has been talk of state progressives primarying Democrats or running as a third party distinct from Democrats to push them further left after the failures of paid family leave and universal health care this year in the State House.
Right.
And I think we're starting to see the fragmenting of that ideological purity that they're having, and I think we're seeing within the Democratic Party, the failure of that big tent, and that we're seeing a move towards a more distinct party, three-party system where you can't be both a Democrat and a progressive. And speaking to the Vermont Republicans, big tent idea, I think we saw in our last election that it didn't really work. We had Manchester's own Brian Keith, who was a relatively moderate Republican, on the left of our big tent, get fairly reelected after several years in the House, and as people like Kurt Wright in Burlington also failed as moderates to get reelected, which I think speaks to the fact that when you are too far to the left of the right, you end up not being able to distinguish yourself in any real way.
And that's actually a really good point, because the Scott Troopers argue that actually you have to be very liberal, almost center left, if you are going to run as a Republican or somebody on the right from Vermont. What would you say to that point?
I don't think that approach is something that we've seen trickle down in terms of success to other members. Scott's been able to craft a personal brand for himself as a moderate individual, but to at the expense of it propagating any sort of conservative positions in office. I think that we've seen him capitulate to the left time and time again. But the Democrats are not going to extend their tolerance for somebody who's going to do that down to other members of his party just because they share that name. And he hasn't proven an ability to get other Republicans elected, or even shown very much of an interest in trying to make that happen.
And the problem for Phil Scott too is that if he's a moderate, and that, like I said, is his brand, he has that cult of personality that's keeping him going. But as soon as someone who has an equal cult of personality, like a T.J. Donovan, were to run against him for governor, or someone like our lieutenant governor also run against him with that big personality around them, you're going to be a Republican who's a Republican, you're not going to win.
Right.
And I think that really shows, when you look at lieutenant governor's race last year, Don Turner is not that much more conservative than someone like Phil Scott, and he had very, very limited success because when you're running against someone like Zuckerman, you have to have a bigger personality, and Don Turner just couldn't do that.
Right.
So I think Phil Scott's success is limited to him as an individual. Like
Right, and so basically what we're seeing is like, I think there were people saying that there were about between 20,000 to 40,000 voters on the right didn't show up at the elections last cycle, and so all the down ballot right from the lieutenant governor were actually hurt. So this is actually a modern myth that we need to bust, and thank you very much for clarifying that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.